It's been a wild year for Magic the Gathering, so today we're looking back at the game's biggest fails from 2023. Honorable mention, the Lord of the Rings Secret Lair drop. Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth was easily one of Magic's biggest successes of the year, and probably the biggest success. Players seem to love the set full of iconic fantasy characters. It played well and sold incredibly well, to the point where it's on track to go down as the best-selling Magic the Gathering set of all time. The Lord of the Rings Secret Lair drop, on the other hand, will not just go down as the worst Secret Lair drop of the year, but probably the worst ever made. It was a huge mess. Sold for $30, the Secret Lair drop featured screen caps from the animated 1978 Lord of the Rings movie, stapled onto a handful of unplayable commons and uncommons, and slip on the ring Mirror of Galadriel, Gandalf Friend of the Shire, and Shire Terrace. The value of all four cards added together came out to less than $1 when the Secret Lair dropped. All in all, the drop wasn't just low value, but it also came across as super low effort, making it the one black mark against the otherwise amazing Lord of the Rings release. Number 5. Geological Appraiser. Let's kick off our list proper with an easy one. Wizards released Geological Appraiser in the Discover mechanic in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, a set that officially released on November 17th. On December 4th, a mere 17 days later, they banned the 4-drop in Pioneer thanks to the devastating new combo deck it enabled, which led to Geological Appraiser tying Omnath Locus of Creation as the 4th fastest banning in the game's entire 30-year history. Making matters worse, Wizards seem pretty oblivious about the power of the Discover mechanic. During the weekly MTG stream where they announced the mechanic, they started off by talking about how Cascade, a notoriously broken mechanic that's dominating Modern and the mechanic that Discover mimics, had some issues, which is something I think everyone could agree on. The thing is, from Wizards' perspective, the problem with Cascade wasn't that it was too good or too broken or too miserable. It's that it wasn't strong enough, because sometimes you might cascade into a card that you didn't want to cast at the time. So they decided to fix this with Discover by powering up the mechanic even more, by making it so that if you didn't want to cast the card that you discovered, you could simply put it into your hand. Oops.
So Cascade had a number of issues. So I think first and foremost, on a gameplay perspective, one of the worst things about Cascade is that it really restricts the kinds of cards you can put into your deck. So like if you Cascade into, a combat trick or a counter spell, it's really unsatisfying and you really don't feel like you actually did the thing. So with Discover, you always have that option to put it into your hand.
Want some Discover cards of your own? Well, you can snag them from our sponsor, Card Kingdom, over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Number 4, standard rotation and ban list changes. For the first part of the year, the standard format was in a pretty rough place. Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, Sheoldred the Apocalypse, and Red-Black X decks in general dominated the meta for months on end, at one point taking up around 40% of the standard meta. By May, many players were either calling for bans or counting down the days until standard would rotate in September with the release of Wilds of Eldraine. On May 7th, Wizards posted an article with a promising title, Revitalizing Standard. But rather than announcing improvements to the format, Wizards instead announced that they would be canceling standard rotation this year, so they could switch to a new standard schedule where 3 years of sets would be legal rather than just 2. They also announced that they would ban cards much less often, with just one full ban list update each year in August, and then emergency ban windows after each set, which they said were for huge mistakes on the level of Felidar Guardian.
The most popular question we've definitely gotten, Andrew, are around bans. So can you tell this, 3 years is definitely a different rotation cadence. How does that change how we approach bans in Standard?
Okay, so the way we're going to approach bans in this new 3-year window is we are only going to have one banning event per year. So we're going to make majority of all of our changes to all formats in that one window, probably in like the late summer. It's a huge change. Also, after every 3 weeks of every single set release, we are going to open up a mini ban window for us to potentially make changes if we, release something and it has a significant negative effect on a format. And I'm going to be extremely clear on the smaller ban window 3 weeks after a set comes out. That's going to be extremely rare. I think we're going to only use that for, I'll use an example, cards like Felidar Guardian, where it's clearly significantly negatively impacting a format. So that is our, nuclear button that we still want to have around just in case things go wrong. But like I said, majority of the changes once per year.
At the time, many players pointed out that this simply wouldn't work. There was just no way to keep formats healthy and fun without the ability to ban cards as needed. One real ban list update a year just wasn't going to cut it. Thankfully, Wizards did ban Fable the Mirrorbreaker, Reckoner Bankbuster, and Invoke Despair in Standard a couple of weeks later, before their once-a-year ban schedule actually started. Making the whole situation even funnier is that when Wizards released their first emergency ban list update, it actually just read like a advertisement for their new play boosters. It just said no changes and didn't explain anything about any format, even though Modern was pretty broken and most players thought the format needed bannings. And then a couple of months after that, in December, their next emergency ban list update came out, and this time they banned a bunch of cards in Modern and in Pioneer, while also announcing that they were once again going to change their ban list philosophy. They were going to try to ban Standard cards just once a year, but bannings in other formats would actually happen much more often, and they'd have an announcement for those bannings with every set release. While the bannings were necessary, and the announcement of more bans is an overwhelmingly positive development, considering that less than 6 months before, Wizards announced the exact opposite. The whole situation kind of reinforced the idea that Wizards doesn't really plan things ahead, and that we shouldn't take their words very seriously because they're bound to change in the next few months anyway. While it's too early to know about how these changes will impact Standard long term, the current format is pretty healthy, which is an encouraging sign, although Wizards didn't actually design these sets to be played together because they didn't know about the rotation changes when they were making these sets, so it seems more like a happy accident than anything Wizards did intentionally. The tone deafness of announcing less bannings and no Standard rotation at a time when most players were calling for bannings and waiting for Standard to rotate, combined with Wizards' ever confusing, changing communication around all of this, brings it in as our number 4 fail of the year. Number 3, the Pinkerton Incident. March of the Machine's Aftermath was set to release on May 12th, but in mid-April, a mostly unknown YouTuber going by the name of Old School MTG uploaded a series of videos to their channel opening boxes of the set, boxes that hadn't even been distributed to stores yet. Old School MTG claimed that they had gotten the boxes by accident. They had ordered some March of the Machines boxes from a friend, but ended up with Aftermath boxes somehow instead.
I don't even know how I got this, but my buddy called me up like a week ago and said, I've got 22 collector's boxes, real cheap, from March of the Machine. Do you want them? I was like, yeah, I definitely do. I was on my honeymoon, so I was like, I'll pick them up when I get back. And when I went to pick them up today, they were Aftermath collector's boxes. I don't even think this set's been spoiled yet. It's not even out yet. So, yeah, I don't know how he got his hands on these, but I've got a March of the Machine Aftermath collector booster. I've actually got 22 of them, so I've got quite a few that I'm going to open over the next few days here.
Exactly how possible or likely this story was hotly debated, let's say, by the community. After posting box opening videos for a few days, a new video popped up on the Old School MTG channel, this time discussing how Wizards has sent the Pinkerton Detective Agency to his house to recover the Aftermath cards. This sent not only the Magic community, but the larger gaming community into a frenzy. The Pinkerton Agency doesn't have the greatest reputation. They've been portrayed as villains in some video games and have been accused of everything from busting unions to even murders over the years. This led to a bunch of articles criticizing Wizards for their actions or their relationship with Pinkerton in general. While getting back the unreleased product may have seemed like a good idea at the time, and perhaps it was, the PR nightmare that ensued was yet another hit to Wizards' already flagging reputation at a time when they were already getting a ton of bad press coming off the D&D OGL debacle just a couple months before. Number 2, March of the Machines Aftermath. Speaking of Aftermath, perhaps the funniest part of the whole Pinkerton incident is that the set itself was horrible, so the reputation hit Wizards took by aggressively defending the set was for a set that was destined to flop incredibly hard anyway. The idea of Aftermath is it was supposed to be a prologue to March of the Machines, showing what happened to some key characters from the set after the Phyrexian invasion defeated. It failed from a flavor standpoint. You really didn't get any story or much character development in the set, and Aftermath was a unique set from a gameplay perspective. In general, Magic sets have more than 250 cards, with a mixture of commons, uncommons, rares, and mythics. Aftermath, on the other hand, had just 50 cards and was heavily skewed towards rares and mythics. As a result, Aftermath was sold in 5-card booster packs rather than the traditional 15-card packs. But Wizards tried to sell the 5-card packs for the same price as the 15-card packs, which really wasn't accepted by the community. Well, the set did have a handful of cool cards, highlighted by modern staple Nissa Resurgent Animist and Calyx Guided by Fate, which more or less created Enchantress in Standard. This wasn't nearly enough to get players to spend full price on a very redundant pack of 5 cards. Collector booster boxes were initially priced at $200 each, basically the same price as any collector booster box, but today you can buy them for like $85, making it one of the biggest crashes we've ever seen for sealed Magic products. A few months after the set released, Wizards head designer Mark Rosewater admitted that Wizards' internal metrics had Aftermath is not only the worst received booster product of the year, but literally the worst received set of all time. It was that bad. Number 1, Chris Cox LARPs the Grinch. According to Hasbro CEO Chris Cox, 2022 was Wizards of the Coast's greatest year ever, with the strength of both Magic and D&D, leading to the brand making $1 billion, billion with a B, for the first time ever. A few months later, Universes Beyond Lord of the Rings released, to much fanfare and huge sales, to the point where the set is on track to pass Modern Horizons 2, a set that released more than 2 years ago, in just a matter of months, for the title of best-selling Magic set of all time. A couple of months after that, in October, Hasbro released their third quarter results for the year, stating that Wizards of the Coast revenue grew by 40% year over year, while profits grew a massive 99%. In Cox's words, Wizards was having a record year. Then in mid-December, as this record year drew towards the close, Cox decided to lay off 20% of Hasbro's staff just 2 weeks before the holidays. Initially, most assumed that these layoffs would focus on Hasbro's struggling toy and entertainment businesses rather than the record-breaking Wizards of the Coast property, but this turned out to be untrue, as many Wizards employees began posting on social media about how they'd been fired just a few days before Christmas with a minimal severance package. Meanwhile, the Grinch that is Hasbro CEO Chris Cox will pull in $9.4 million this year between his base salary and other compensation, and Hasbro's stock price, which has been in the dumpster all year, rose on the news. While we won't see the impacts of these layoffs on the game immediately, we will eventually. Maybe by some miracle, Cox's heart will grow 3 sizes and he'll hire back these hardworking employees responsible for making him nearly $10 million this year, but honestly, this seems unlikely. Unless this happens, going full-on supervillain on employees while also touting a record-breaking year of profits makes Chris Cox LARPing the Grinch this holiday season Magic's biggest failure of the year. What do you think was Magic's biggest fail this year? Let me know in the comments. Looking for even more Magic? Well, check out the video about Magic's first meme in Throat Wolf, or maybe the one where we taught some arena Zoomers about Ponza.